Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest.
Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Youssef.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Talkhouse podcast. I'm Nick Dawson, editor-in-chief of Talkhouse Film. On today's episode, we have writer-director Dina Amer in conversation with the creator and star of Hulu's Ramy, comedian Ramy Youssef. The talk was recorded at the Angelica Film Center in New York City after a screening of Amer's debut feature, You Resemble Me, an innovative and emotionally resonant portrait of Asna Ait Boulassen, a radicalized Muslim who was erroneously reported as France's first female suicide bomber in the wake of the November 2015 Paris attacks. For Amer, You Resemble Me is a very personal project. Born and raised in the US, the Egyptian-American Amer began her career as a journalist, reporting on the Middle East for outlets like the New York Times, CNN, and Vice News. She covered Asna's story for Vice, repeating the authorities' belief that she was a terrorist and a murderer. You Resemble Me is, in essence, a corrective to that reporting, a deeply empathetic, lightly fictionalized portrait that charts Asna's painful childhood of family dysfunction through to her troubled 20s and ultimate radicalization by the Islamic State. Rather than leaving her as a reductive, one-dimensional figure of hate, it humanizes her and makes her story comprehensible. Amer was a film student at NYU when she started working on You Resemble Me, and over almost 7 years persisted with the project through a series of setbacks to finally get it made on her own terms. During her epic quest to make the movie, Amer picked up a number of allies. Her executive producers include Spike Jonze, Spike Lee, Riz Ahmed, and Alma Harrell. And one of those allies was fellow Egyptian-American Ramy Youssef. The two met at a film festival in Egypt in 2017 when Youssef was gearing up for Ramy, his breakout success, which has earned him a Golden Globe and a brace of Emmy nominations. In celebratory mood at the Angelica, Amer and Youssef reconvened for a wide-ranging and very entertaining conversation which covers the major deal that Dina turned down, Spike Lee's take on her doing the film her way, her resilience and what she had to give up to make You Resemble Me, her adventures trying to get Asna's family on board, and their reaction to the film, casting a quote-unquote super hot actor as Asna's cousin who seduces her into radical Islam, and much more. So, without further ado, let's listen to that conversation.
Dude, it's crazy that we're here. Well, so when we were coming in, it was really funny because you said something that I was thinking about, but it really took me back. We were talking about being, well, it was the first time we met. We were in Guna, in Egypt, 2017, and it was the first Guna Film Festival. I went with your brother Kareem and Jahan, and I was like running around this film festival trying to find people to play my parents in a pilot that I was trying to shoot for Hulu. And we were hanging out and you were telling me about this movie you really wanted to make that you felt like you had to do your way. And you were kind of talking me through this whole opportunity that you had turned down because you felt like you wouldn't be able to make the film that you wanted to make. Could you just like talk a little bit about that and talk about how that has shown in what's happening here?
So that was a critical moment where I had just left this big Amazon deal. It was like a multi-million-dollar deal. And I put together what I thought was, a dream team to bring this complicated story into fruition. And I walked away after months of negotiating terms. And I was just around the corner from signing on the dotted line because at the final hour, they wanted me to contractually define how much fiction was in the film. And they kind of, I feel, got cold feet from allowing this story to be a fully fledged narrative depiction of someone who was caught in the headlines and called a terrorist. They felt safer keeping this in a documentary space. And for me, that was a compromise that I just couldn't do. In my bones, it just didn't feel right. And, a lot of people around me were like, think of your career. You have a bird in the hand. This is a multi-million-dollar deal. Like, it's hard to get a deal on the table. Just make it work and think about the next one. And I had spent years I mean, in this city, right? In New York, I was at NYU on a scholarship, and I wrote the first drafts of this film. And
What year was that?
this was like 2015.
Wow.
This is nearly a 7-year journey that I've been on. And I was writing the script, and I had this dream to tell this story, and yet I didn't have the money. Everyone thought it was too dangerous of a topic and too sensitive. And I would come to this cinema, the Angelica, to find refuge. Literally, this was a salvation for me. Whenever I would feel really low and get worried that it was going to be too impossible to make this film, I would come here. I would watch films. I would get inspired and fed, and I would be able to keep going on this journey to make this film. And so, when Amazon was like, listen, we want it to be more of a documentary than a narrative, I was like, I haven't been sleeping on people's couches and barely able to afford meals to compromise at the final hour. I'm sorry. The story is powerful. These people deserve to be brought to life, on their own terms in a complicated narrative that can be gray and not be held to a black and white factual storytelling.
So the fear was that you would be like romanticizing, or we would be getting too close to the idea of somebody getting into this situation. Was that the fear that you perceived was happening?
I think the fear was that there was red tape around humanizing a woman who was Muslim, Arab, and brown, and caught in the headlines for being enchanted with a violent organization and being falsely accused of being the first female suicide bomber. That Hollywood couldn't go there. We can't. That's too far to humanize such a woman. We can humanize, other people who are villains, like through cinema, like Adolf Hitler and Jojo Rabbit or Ted Bundy, and the endless films about him. But brown Arab Muslim girl who didn't even set off the bomb. No. There's religion involved, and that term terrorism had been coined unfortunately, to Islam through the news cycle, And so this film, as what I can call myself, a recovering journalist, was very much my way of showing, of kind of like doing right instead of all the wrong that the media had done in perpetuating that characterization of Muslims and of terrorism, and allowing people, especially people who unfortunately had been seduced into such an organization or been enchanted by ISIS, to exist within complexity.
Because I think this film is really, it's so clear like how many systems are broken to put someone in a situation and to put kind of society in a situation. It kind of feels like everybody's really in a lot of pain. It starts obviously early on, and then you can kind of see it in every relationship. Did you see the fracture in those systems from your work as a journalist? How did that open up into, you choosing to feel like, okay, this is the first thing that I want to write?
Can I tell you, it was not a choice. It was a necessity. I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be telling a story in France. I barely speak the language, nor about terrorism. That was the last subject I'd ever want to spend 7 years making a film about. And yet I was called to this. I mean, I have no other way to explain it other than it was irrational, and yet it was necessary. And nothing else in the world mattered but telling this story. It became that urgent, and it was pulsing through my body as like my mission in life, that I have to tell this story. It doesn't make sense. I think these moments in life come to you where you are driven and even you look at the obstacles, and for some reason they don't hold you back. They make you run harder.
I remember you telling me something, and you have to correct me if this isn't exactly how you said it, but I remember you kind of feeling this, telling me that you felt a strangeness around the fact that she kind of looked like you, and then obviously you're like in the film. Can you talk a little bit about what those feelings are when these are the associations that we kind of see, on screen of ourselves, and a little bit about your decision to be in this, because that was something that I think you were really wrestling with back and forth. And I think I had seen a cut, I want to say it was like January 2021.
Yeah.
I saw a cut that you weren't in, and we kind of started talking, and then I realized that there was footage that you were in, and I was like, oh, where is that? So talk a little bit about, like, because it's interesting to me, because I think there was a level of kind of not wanting to work with anyone who would censor what you were doing. But then I think there's another layer that we face as artists where we then start censoring ourselves. And I feel like, as someone who was able to see a few different versions of this, what was that battle like? I know I asked you like 2 questions, but there's kind of like the one of that seeing yourself in it, and then a little bit about the self-censorship.
Yeah, I mean, this whole journey kicked off with Hasna's family after I was actually at the scene of the attacks shortly after the bombs went off.
As a journalist?
As a journalist reporting for Vice News, reported, just like every other media outlet that day, that Hasna was the first female suicide bomber, which was fake news. And I felt very guilty about contributing to a fake news cycle.
You covered it as...
on air.
With that sensationalism.
Yes, because that was confirmed by the authorities. And that headline traveled the world, and the damage was done. And not only that, 2 other women, her sister included, were implicated in that headline. And there was this question mark about who really was Hasna.
Because of the different photos used.
Because of the different photos that the media published. And so I felt terribly guilty and found Hasna's mother's house. And I, was first bombarded by like these young guys from the hood wearing like Adidas tracksuits, who were like 15 years old, being like, oh, like, where do you think you're going? I'm like, to meet Hasna's mom upstairs. And they're like, get out of here. No, like, no cameras. And I'm like, no, but I'm Muslim and I speak Arabic. They're like, we don't give a shit. Get out of here. You know what I mean? And then they like ran after me. They're like, hey, but if you give us your number, then maybe we can try to hook you up. And I was like, I'm good. But then I came back the next day and they weren't there. And I went straight upstairs into the building. And I didn't even know which floor it was. I just knocked on my like favorite number. And a man opened the door. And there was something very familiar about him. And he was like, where are you going? I'm like, oh, I'm trying to find Hasna's mother's, apartment. Do you know where she lives? He's like, she lives here. She's my girlfriend. I'm like, what? And he's like, and the guy was Egyptian. And there's not too many Egyptians in Paris.
This is first knock.
First knock.
Wow.
Door number 4. All right?
Wow.
And he's like, let me get her. And he brings the mother out and they keep me at the door. And we start speaking, and Hasna's mother shows me a picture of Hasna when she was a young girl.
And at this point, has she talked to any news outlets?
No, she's turned everyone away.
You're the first person to get to her.
The first person that she's allowed. I'm still at the doorstep, right? But she's shown me this picture she's like, if you want to know who my daughter is, this is who she is. She's this little girl. She's not the woman in the headlines wearing the niqab who the media is calling, a suicide bomber. This is my daughter. And she said to me, you really resemble Hasna. You laugh like her, and you're naive like her. And it really it like stunned me, because there was this like uncanny point of reflection where the mother, who had abandoned her daughter, was saying, I am just like Hasna. And from that point, the film it became clear that I could hook into something that made me the right person to tell this story. And that actually, as a human being, I needed to tell this story to unpack something within myself, within my own identity. That's why it was urgent. Because in fact, I saw myself so deeply in her. This wasn't about terrorism. It was about trying to navigate an identity that you feel sometimes is in contradiction with itself. And the struggle of that. Of trying to keep faith, and also living in the West, and how can I exist on my own terms as a Muslim woman? You know what I mean? And the finger honestly is pointed to everybody in society, to the West, to the so-called authorities in religion, to everyone. Everyone is complicit. So that point of struggle with an identity became something and the schizophrenia of self that could derive from that. When you don't have clarity of who you are, or there's kind of like a yo-yoing within yourself, that felt very rich and visceral. And from there, I could tell something that was honest.
just hearing about this experience, it's and maybe it's fair to say that the depth in which you kind of went here is this, you know, you used the word fake news for your first initial reporting, and it's kind of like a journey from fake news to real news, right? To kind of really digging in, because I thought it was interesting that we went from narrative then into doc and real footage. So there's something really grounded here. It's kind of your artistic experience and interpretation, and I think you kind of get into that human thing where all of us feel like multiple, you know, we all have multiple parts, right? It's
Exactly.
It's and you obviously show that. So speaking of the multiple parts, it's kind of the other question that I asked. So there's the part of you that wants to make this film, make it like totally, fully honest. And then I think there was the part of you in the editing process that was maybe like, maybe this should have more documentary footage, because I saw a version that did have a lot of documentary footage. So talk about those parts of yourself that kind of probably, you know, pushed forward and said, you know, fuck everybody, this is what I'm going to do. And then kind of like, maybe this should be a documentary, you know, at certain points. You know, how do you battle with that and end up with this edit?
You know, this was a 7-year journey, as I said. And so each stage of it was thorny and intense. From the inception of choosing the story when it was so sensitive, to dropping out of NYU to go make this film, to leaving the Amazon deal, to convincing actors to step into the shoes and humanize some of the most vilified and hated people across Europe. Every stage of it was hard. And then we got to the edit room. And because the groundwork of making this film was, I had understood, like, this is, you know, 130 people died. This is sacred. You know, blood had been spilled. I can't just like parachute into Paris and just quickly, like, you know, make a point and leave. Like, I really had to spend time, years, with the community and understand deeply before, and reflect on what I was going to say before saying it, you know? And so in the edit room, just step back. So the script was written out of 130 hours of interviews I had done with the family and with all, like, the community that was connected to Hasna. And we had all this great verite documentary footage that in the edit room I played around at some stages, like seeing how it would feel if it wasn't just straight narrative, if you had kind of like a Greek chorus of the family throughout the film at certain stages, like chiming in. We tried all sorts. We kind of had like a bag of riches, because we had all this, you know, strong narrative footage, and then we had all this also, you know, so much verite footage that we could have used. And in the end, though, what felt very honest for me and important was that you got to experience Hasna as a child, you experienced her arc, and only at the end were you reminded that this is a true story with real life implications, and that the family was a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was so impressive kind of, you know, watching this. And I think that all that interviewing, all that interrogation, I think that you did, not just of your subjects, but I think of yourself, is really clear. And I think it was interesting too to see, with your backing, you know, your background as a journalist, coming into a project like this, I really appreciated how much this was a fiction film, you know, in the sense of really just going for these character arcs. And there are these really great scenes that are like mirrors of each other. I mean, on one level, there's just a lot of literal mirrors, which I think is something that we do see in film, but I couldn't remember the last time I really loved seeing mirrors on film in the way that I did here, because it really was, it felt so appropriate. It didn't just feel like we were doing it to do it. It felt like it was happening at different stages of this woman's life, and I thought that was really amazing. Outside of the systems, I mean, her mother obviously fails her in the beginning, but then it really feels like she's mainly coming up against men in her life who are obviously doing a variety of things that really scar her and really derail her sense of safety. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship that she has with men in the film?
I think obviously men play a big role, because ultimately she gets seduced and brainwashed by her cousin. He sold her into having a family and building a life together. So ultimately, yes, I mean, that was the seduction that ultimately killed her. But I really feel what was important to me in making this film was like not pointing to a single person or thing that was to blame. It was really pointing the finger at everyone and showing that, like, I just wanted to kind of unveil the different ingredients that led to this rotten stew of her deciding that it was a good idea to help her cousin find this hideout, and it was a good idea to become like enchanted by ISIS. Like, that was important because every time you try to peg radicalization to like a lack of employment or a lack of education or a broken family, you find someone who didn't struggle with any of that, but still radicalized. And the common denominator is really a fractured sense of self. And so that was what was really important to me. Yes, her family let her down. The French state let her down. She could have died protecting France as a policewoman, Sadly, she grabbed all our attention in this tragic way. And I think that was a really important point to make.
I thought that you did a really effective job of not making, a film that would be like, root for the terrorist or something like that, or even I think it almost strips that word out. I don't even think this is about, again, all these failures and seeing how they kind of stir up in this person. So I thought that was really effective, and at the same time, I think you're going to have people who tell you, wait, did you just, romanticize terrorism? And you didn't help yourself on that level because you made the ISIS guy hot and all that. Like, he was like, he was all like seductive and the big lips and all that stuff. So that maybe you could have, maybe you could have done a slightly less attractive casting choice, but that's your call.
Right.
But yeah,
He was the only guy who was brave enough, actually, in France to play that role. Everyone else was too afraid. They're like, you want to put a death knell to my career? Of course, I can't play this role. And he honestly, he looked at it as an artist and was like, I feel like as an actor, I get excited about playing people who are very complicated. And I'm like, yeah, you should. That's what this craft is for. That's why we make movies. That's why to allow people to exist as more than just one thing. Because no one is just one thing. Even like the villain has complex emotions. And so, this is the way I feel like we can process the trauma of these like senseless mass shootings that happen. Like, we come together, we get into a dark room and we watch something, and it's hopefully cathartic, and it helps raise other questions, and it helps, confirm the humanity of the people who are behind these headlines, which is important because thank God it's a human problem. That means that we can actually like have a chance at like relating to these people and come up with better solutions on how to deal with it.
So you're kind of saying like when you don't have a piece like this, you kind of can just throw it under, put it under the rug and just say, oh, these people are just monsters. They were just mental. They were just
Absolutely.
crazy. They were just whatever. And then it starts to feel unsolvable, as opposed to kind of showing a portrait that says, wait, like, look at the 1,000 failures that led
exactly
to this moment.
And guess what? There are so many other people in this world. There are so many Hasnas, people who are on the edge of either finding within themselves a purpose and a way to contribute towards society, or saying, you know what, screw it. I'm going to burn the place down and take as many people as I can with me. And that's a real thing. That's a real threat, especially in this country. So we have no choice but to talk about it and to look at it at a root level, and to see the people who decide to find purpose in being through pulling the trigger also as human beings. Because I do not believe that they came out of the womb being like, I want to kill people. I don't think that's true. There are dashed dreams, and there's other moments where people could have gone down a very different lane of a very different lane in life. And that's important to remember, so that we can keep that in mind for the other people who are about to fall into the same trap.
In your countless kind of interviews, do you feel like there was a specific prevailing theme that you thought, oh, if this thing was different in her life, this wouldn't have happened, like this one thing?
I mean, I think that it's too easy to peg it on her family.
Yeah.
Because absolutely, she had a broken family, and I think there were deep childhood wounds, and that trauma haunted her as an adult, absolutely, and the separation from her sister. Her real sister, Mary, told me, please, I want the audience to know that we didn't want to be separated. That was really the breaking point for Hasna and for Miriam. You know, like the real Miriam, I showed her the film and before we went to Venice, and she told me she had a baby, and she was showing me pictures of her newborn, and I was like, oh, where's your child? I'd love to meet her. And she told me that the child was taken immediately after she was born, at birth. The state services took her because they deemed that she was mentally unfit. Because after Hasna died and after Miriam was caught in the same headline, something really cracked. And she's been unwell. It's like kind of like she plays this film in her mind constantly. You know, oh, our childhood when we used to wear the same dresses. Wait, who really was Hassan as an adult? What was it like for her in that apartment with my cousin? Could it have ended differently? And so I realized I was bearing witness to intergenerational trauma and the same cycle continuing. That these young children, you know, they were young children who went through the foster care system and struggled to reconcile their identity as Muslim French kids. And there was a consequence to that, where Miriam, at all costs, just wanted to fit in and be white and get a nose job and speak perfect French and come off as just like, you know, a white Parisian girl. Only in the end just to be called a terrorist like her sister. Right? So that like offering of like, oh, la vie ensemble, which is like a French ideal. Let's like all live together and, you know, leave who you are, your heritage at the door, you know, and we'll just be equals. It's beautiful in theory, but unfortunately in reality, everyone's treated as where they come from. You know what I mean? There is just discrimination, unfortunately. And so even though Miriam had tried with everything in her being to separate herself from Hasna, who was a troublemaker, and to just follow the rules, integrate at all costs, it didn't work out for her. She was called just the same thing as her sister, a terrorist, you know? And I think that's a really important point to remember, that like there's this emphasis sometimes of like, well, in France, well, people should just integrate, but like it's a false promise because there is real discrimination.
How much of her family has seen the film?
So Miriam saw the film and she loved it, thankfully. And she really felt that we had done a justice that the news had failed to do, you know, that we had like kind of salvaged this injustice that the news had committed. And she called it like angel work, you know, which I was really grateful to hear. Because in some ways, like she's the most important audience member, right? She very bravely shared her story with me. And so for her to feel like we did an honest job and that it was, you know, it was beautiful. She wasn't expecting it to be like, she's like, all these years we were doing it, I didn't understand in the end it was actually going to be like, you know, pretty and stuff. I was like, yeah, we worked really hard. And, you know, our DP, Omar Malik, did an incredible job shooting it, you know? Shout out Omar, he's in the house tonight.
Oh, how was that getting, you know, obviously there's a lot of fear surrounding the subject. How was it getting such a great crew? You have a lot of really great producers attached to the film. What were those conversations like?
I think they all thought I was like a mad woman, to be honest. Like they had no choice but to support me because I was on this, you know, life or death mission. I mean, I remember my brother, Kareem, he's a producer on the film and he's here as well. When we had the Amazon deal, I used to say in the room, I'd be like, I can make this film and die. And he would pull me aside afterwards and be like, please don't say that again. Like, it's not a good selling point. I'm like, but that's how I really feel. Like, I just need to make the film. He's like,
and here you are saying it again. Yeah.
shamelessly saying it again. No, but that's how I think, you know, you have to, we were talking about this a bit earlier, like in order to make a film, it requires a great deal of faith because you are literally kind of projecting into and trying to projecting into something that doesn't exist and trying to rally as many people as you can with you. And you're like, it exists, it's real, it's gonna be brilliant. Everyone's like, I don't know, it sounds really like, you know, dangerous and sensitive and not maybe choose a lighter subject. And I was like, no, this is the one, you know? But I feel like when these moments in life happen where you just know you have to do something. You have no choice but to listen to it, for better and for worse. And so like, thank God I didn't take that Amazon deal. Thank God I got to make the film on my own terms. And thank God I had an incredible team of people who stuck by me and made sure the baby was birthed. You know, like we went to Venice, we've won over 30 awards. You know, thankfully the film has been very well received internationally on the festival circuit. Audiences have, you know, really embraced it and been shook, and there's been rich conversations. And we still didn't get the right deal for distribution in the US. And we were like, what's the disconnect here? You know, I got like love letters from different distributors being like, the film is beautiful and da-da-da-da-da. Maybe we can work on something else, but this one's a little too hot. You know what I mean? And if it wasn't for my other producer, Elizabeth Woodward, who is a powerhouse and made sure that this film would go to theaters, and we contacted all the theaters across the country. And we ended up here, and we're gonna be, you know, in chains like AMC and Regal and Harkins and other Angelica chains across the country, you know. But so the spirit, yeah. So thank you guys. So the spirit of this film has been like fiercely independent. Like Spike Lee, who was my professor at NYU, and he actually he was the only person when the Amazon deal kind of like took a turn and they wanted me to do reenactments instead of fiction. He was the only one who was like, pray on it. And if it's not the film you want to make, walk away. And I was like, okay, but like, how do I make it? He's like, I don't know, just keep praying. but basically, yeah, the whole journey was fiercely independent. And like, I'm just happy that in some ways, we're able to go straight to audiences right now and allow people to see this film, and that there's an appetite for it. And that shows that people are willing to experience radical narratives. That, you know, that I feel that's like a win for other filmmakers out there who are maybe just like me 7 years ago, coming to the Angelica with a dream of making a film and watching films to feel better about themselves and keep inspired and be like, but how am I going to tell my weird story or my crazy radical film? There's a way. Just keep going. You know, keep going. Like, you just can't. You're gonna fall down a million times. You're gonna have so many nervous breakdowns, but you have to keep going no matter what.
Yeah, you definitely. No, for sure. It's like making anything, definitely.
I didn't have much of a social life, I have to tell you. This was about it. It's like a full birth. Yeah.
Who would you be most excited to watch this film in terms of audiences? What the idea of what kind of person or would be really, you know, I think shifted by this in your mind?
It's people who would go into this film already thinking they have having this preconceived notion on individuals like Hasna, and kind of accepting the dehumanization of the news narrative and dismissing someone like Hasna as a monster because of that news cycle. Someone like that who could come and experience the film and realize, oh wow, she was a girl who just wore a pink dress with flowers on it with her sister, and she was sweet and she was likable and she had dreams and she wanted to be a policewoman and shit. This is how she ended up. That's the person who, and I feel changed by that. I feel like now I see this differently. That's the kind of person who I want to see this film. And I've had that reaction from many people. I had one of my mentors from the Sundance Labs is this, she's an acting teacher who's like a legend there. And she's like this old Jewish woman. And she was like, you know, Dina, I have to tell you, like, I used to always judge those people on the news. She's like, and after watching this film, I really got it for the first time. She doesn't just get called a terrorist. She's also a girl who I kind of feel bad for, you know? And I was like, great. That's the point of the film. She's like, gosh, you almost made me want to convert to Islam, Dina. I'm like, okay, take it easy, take it easy.
I don't know who that person is. This is definitely.
Yeah, I swear she exists. She's real. She loves him. She was joking. But,
I hope.
No, but she was saying because she was saying that like she understood that it's not the religion that is violent, and that is what the news perpetuates with the news cycle. That it was actually, this film is not about Islam. It's not about terrorism. It's about how a woman who is trying to navigate her identity and who feels very abandoned by society can end up taking a very making a very bad choice and grabbing our attention in the worst way possible. That's what it's about.
This interaction that you're talking about, with this person is someone who is like really open-minded and they kind of want to see it. What do you think? And I think this is something that everyone's facing as they're making stuff, because I think people these days are just kind of watching what they want to watch, right? It's like you want to not believe in COVID, you watch Fox. You want to believe in it, you watch MSNBC. You kind of pick. How do you view that as a filmmaker with a film like this to get into, the house or the place of someone who might not be willing to see this? Do you think they even get a chance to see this, or do you think it's just kind of like, it goes wherever it goes?
No, I mean, we are planning on bringing this to, communities that normally wouldn't get to see this. I want to take it into the prison system. I want to take it into the Bible Belt of America. It's really important that this film gets seen actually by audiences that aren't just liberal and progressive and open to, hearing alternative.
Will you do screenings like this in the Bible Belt?
Yeah.
That's another documentary. Just the screening of
Absolutely.
this. That would be, yeah.
We showed this film in France in this very small town that's, very, very Catholic and conservative, where the majority of people are elderly. And, we had a standing ovation. And we also had a couple of old white French people say, "You seem like such a nice girl. Why would you want to hurt my feelings like this?" You know what I mean? And I'm like, and they
left feeling hurt.
The next day, they would run into me walking in the town. And they'd be like, I couldn't sleep last night, and I was thinking about your film, but you seem so nice. Why would you do such a thing? I'm like, I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to not sleep last night, old man. But it's good that you're reflecting on this story more deeply. That's the purpose, I think, of art.
That was another thing that I thought you did really well with the tone, is that it definitely did not do any of that celebrity. There was this, I would even say a nauseating kind of sadness throughout it that I think it really spoke to it just didn't feel romantic. Truly, other than again that ISIS guy, but it really I thought was very effective in that, because I think there can be the danger that something like this looks interesting to somebody, and I don't think it really did at any point. I think it really I think it probably felt as bleak as her own experience did. Well, I got the signal a few times, but I was just love hearing you talk. I think I personally just really, really proud of you and really proud of this film.
Thank you,
I think
Ramy.
it's a really important offering, and I really I feel like everyone here realizes how special this is. So thanks for making it.
Thank you, Ramy. And this is a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Screening at the Angelica.
Yeah. Give it up for Dina. This is amazing.
And having Ramy here beside me after I had walked away from Amazon, and I remember we were in Ghana, I'm like, we were swimming, in the Red Sea in Egypt. And I was like, yeah. So I walked away from the deal, and he was like, are you crazy? He's like, why would you do that? I'm like, I had to. And and here we are, with the finished film. So I'm really grateful to live that arc with you,
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much to Ramy Youssef and Dina Amer for being on the Talkhouse podcast, and thanks to you for listening. You Resemble Me is out now and is expanding to theatres across the country. This episode was engineered by Carlos Fonseca and edited by Myron Kaplan. The Talkhouse podcast theme music, as ever, was composed and performed by The Range. For more filmmakers talking film and TV, visit talkhouse.com/film, where you can read more excellent pieces than I could possibly list, including one by Dina's co-writer and cinematographer, Omer Malik. Subscribe to the Talkhouse podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts, and go dig into our archive. I'm Nick Dawson, and until next time, take it easy and stay safe.